So imagine this. I'm knee-deep into a 3-year relationship with a girl who thinks trust is just a setting on her phone she can toggle off whenever she feels like it. I'll call her Emily because every Emily I've known could run a covert surveillance operation out of a minivan. Now, I'm not some party animal. If anything, I'm aggressively normal. I work a 9-to-5 fixing software bugs no one cares about, lift weights so my metabolism doesn't quit on me, and spend way too many nights binge-watching cooking shows, even though my culinary skills peak at making grilled cheese. That's it, that's my scandalous life. But to Emily, apparently I'm some undercover Casanova. The way she saw it, every time I said, "I'm just tired," what I really meant was, "I'm exhausted from all the secret affairs I'm juggling." She never said it out loud. Not at first. It was more like a constant hum in the background, like a mosquito you can't see but you know is there. It started with casual check-ins. Cute at first, like, "Hey, just thinking about you." Then it became, "Send me a pic of where you are." Then it morphed into, "Why does your coworker Karen comment LOL on your memes?" The thing is, I got it. She'd been hurt before. Bad. Some dude wrecked her trust back in college, and I was supposed to be the one who proved not all guys were human trash fires. Problem is, no matter how loyal I was, it just wasn't enough. And when she started testing me, that's when the gears really started slipping. First was Snapchat. She made a fake account, Natasha 22 inches, who just happened to be new to the area and looking for friends. Friends, huh? Sure. I smelled it instantly. Natasha had Emily written all over her. Like, who else says totally 5 times in one paragraph? So I ignored it, thought maybe she'd realize how ridiculous it was. Spoiler, she didn't. Next came the burner Instagram account. Same game, different app. A local photographer who loved tech guys slid into my DMs. I replied with a, "LOL, wrong guy, best of luck." Thought that would be enough. Wrong again. The final straw? She messaged me on Reddit. And Reddit is my turf. I'm not out there thirst trapping on Instagram. I'm arguing about why pineapple doesn't belong on pizza and posting memes about existential dread. But even there, she found me. A local gamer girl who loved old school RPGs and found my comments hilarious. Right. Because the IRS is just the world's worst subscription service is apparently a pickup line now. That's when it clicked. Emily didn't want to catch me cheating. She needed to catch me. It was like she was building her own self-fulfilling prophecy. So I replied, just once, "You're trying way too hard." And then, silence. Not just, "Hey, maybe I overreacted," silence. I'm talking storm before the hurricane, silence. Slamming cabinets. Angry texting her best friend. Passive-aggressively turning the thermostat to 62 degrees even though she's the one who's always cold. I knew a blow-up was coming. I just didn't realize how hard it would hit. That night, after a dinner so tense you could have cut it with a butter knife, she finally exploded. "You're hiding something!" she shouted, tears brimming. I'm sitting there, holding a half-eaten quesadilla, wondering what universe I fell into. I said, trying to stay calm. "I haven't done anything." Her eyes were wild. "Exactly," she cried. "Nobody's that perfect." I blinked. Because what do you even say to that? And that's when she hit me with it. If you're not cheating, then you must be hiding something else. Maybe you're not even into women. I literally choked on a bite of tortilla. "Wait, what?" "It makes sense," she insisted, pacing like she was solving a conspiracy. "You never flirt. You never look at other girls. Normal guys slip up sometimes." And there it was. Somehow my loyalty had become Exhibit A in the case against me. I stared at her, feeling this weird mix of heartbreak, confusion, and the kind of exhausted amusement you feel when your GPS sends you into a lake. I loved her. I really did. But man, this was about to get a whole lot messier. Fast forward 2 weeks. It's December. Emily's place looks like Santa's workshop exploded. Lights on every window, wreaths on every door, and enough peppermint candles burning to knock out a Clydesdale. We're supposed to go to her family's annual Christmas Eve dinner, an event so intense it makes the Hunger Games look like a casual brunch. Matching sweaters, caroling, competitive gingerbread house building, the whole 9 yards. Except, there's a problem, a big one. The night before Christmas Eve, Emily finds an old message on my phone from 3 months ago from a coworker asking if I wanted to grab lunch. "Explain this," she demands, waving my phone like it's a smoking gun. "Explain what?" I say, genuinely confused. "It's a lunch invite. We went to Subway. I got a 6-inch turkey. It wasn't a date, it was carbs. But she's not having it. In her mind, it's proof. Proof that I'm hiding things. Proof that I'm untrustworthy. Proof that I'm, apparently, part of a deep-seated conspiracy involving turkey sandwiches and betrayal. Long story short, Christmas Eve turns into an argument so loud the neighbor's inflatable snowman deflates in fear. "You need to leave," she says finally, voice cold. "Emily, come on, it's Christmas." "Exactly. And I don't want to spend it with a liar." And just like that, I'm standing outside in the snow, a duffel bag slung over my shoulder, wondering if there's a Guinness World Record for fastest holiday eviction. I crash at a motel off the highway, the kind where the TV only gets 2 channels and one of them is static. The bedspread looks like it's seen more crime scenes than an episode of Dateline. Merry Christmas to me. I spend the night eating vending machine Oreos and watching reruns of Home Alone, feeling more kinship with Kevin McAllister than I ever thought possible. At some point, my phone buzzes. It's a text from Emily's brother, Dave. "We need to talk." Fantastic. Because nothing says holiday spirit like getting summoned to a showdown by a guy who still thinks The Fast and the Furious is a documentary. And deep down, I know exactly what's coming. This mess? It's just getting started. Christmas morning dawned gray and miserable, like even the weather was too depressed to show up properly. I woke up in my dingy motel room to the sound of someone arguing in the hallway over a vending machine eating their dollar. The text from Dave, Emily's brother, still sat unread on my phone screen, blinking like a time bomb. I had 2 choices: ghost him, or show up and defend my honor like some discount knight who lost his horse and had to Uber to the battlefield. I chose option stupid. I went. Dave lived at Emily's parents' house, at least part-time, and when I pulled up, it was everything you'd expect. A giant inflatable Santa, face-planted on the lawn, synchronized Christmas lights blinking jingle bells, and about 7 cars in the driveway. Everyone was home, of course, per Tania. I knocked once. The door swung open so fast I barely had time to flinch. It was Dave. A B1. 6 feet of pure. "Did you hurt my sister?" Energy wrapped in red plaid pajamas. "Come on in," he said, not smiling. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and unresolved tension. Emily's parents sat stiffly in the living room, pretending to watch It's a Wonderful Life. Her younger sister was sprawled on the floor assembling a 2,000-piece puzzle, with all the focus of someone trying not to listen. Dave led me to the back porch, shutting the sliding glass door behind us like he was locking me into an interrogation room. "So," he started, arms crossed, "you got something to say?" "Yeah," I said, keeping my hands out where he could see them like that would help. "I'm not cheating, never was." He squinted, sizing me up like I was a used car he didn't trust. "Then why's she so upset?" "Because," I said, trying to keep my voice even, "she convinced herself something had to be wrong. She couldn't believe someone could just be faithful." Dave rubbed the back of his neck, his anger cooling slightly. "Yeah, well, Em's had a rough go." "I know," I said. "I tried to be different." He studied me for a long minute. The porch light flickered overhead like it was unsure whether to stay out of this. Finally, Dave sighed. "Look, man, I don't think you're a bad dude. But sometimes, when people are used to pain, peace looks suspicious." It hit me harder than any punch would have. "So what now?" I asked, not sure if I wanted an answer. "Now?" Dave shrugged. "I don't know. She's stubborn. Once she's decided something, it takes a miracle to change her mind." "Great. Add perform miracle to my holiday to-do list." Before I left, Emily's mom pressed a foil-wrapped plate of cookies into my hand. No words. Just that sad, tight-lipped smile moms reserve for their kids' exes. I drove back to the motel with the cookies on the passenger seat, feeling like the world's saddest Uber Eats delivery guy. Back in the room, I collapsed onto the bed. The mattress let out a sound like a dying goat. Hal Jubareed. I stared at the ceiling, the flickering motel light strobing like a bad nightclub. Hal Jubareed. I wanted to text Emily. Call her. Go back and fix it. But what do you fix when the other person's determined you're broken? The worst part was, I still loved her. Loved her enough to walk through a blizzard of accusations and doubt, and still hope, somewhere deep down, that she'd remember who I really was. But hope is a dangerous thing to drag around after Christmas, especially when you don't know if you're ever getting back inside. The days after Christmas stretched out like a bad dream you can't wake up from. I holed up in the motel, surviving on leftover cookies and regret. No word from Emily. Not a text, not a call, not even a "you forgot your charger" passive-aggressive post-it note. It was like I'd been erased. At first, I told myself she just needed space. Time to think. Maybe the Christmas chaos had just pushed everything too far, and she'd realize it for what it was. A giant misunderstanding fueled by fear. But then the rumors started trickling in. It began with a friend, someone who'd heard that I'd been emotionally manipulating Emily for months. That I'd gaslighted her into doubting herself. That I was dangerous. I blinked at my phone, rereading the words, dangerous, me, the guy who alphabetizes his spice rack and panics when his cat sneezes too loudly. I laughed, short, bitter. But it didn't feel funny, because once a story starts spreading, it doesn't matter if it's true. It takes on a life of its own. Hulaba. Mutual friends started acting weird. Invitations dried up. Group chats fell silent. I wasn't just the guy who got dumped at Christmas anymore. I was radioactive. And Emily? She stayed silent, which somehow hurt worse than anything she could have said. One night, Mark, my best friend, the guy whose idea of fine dining is a pizza roll buffet, finally dragged me out for drinks. You gotta get out of this room, man, he said, tossing me a jacket that smelled vaguely of gym socks and optimism. We hit up a local dive bar, the kind of place where the Christmas decorations stay up until Valentine's Day because no one has the heart to take them down. Over cheap beer and terrible karaoke, I tried to forget. It almost worked until I saw her, Emily, across the room, laughing, surrounded by friends. She looked good, better than me, that's for sure. Her hair curled perfectly over her shoulders. Her sweater, that same mustard yellow she used to joke, made her look like a condiment but secretly loved. And there I was, crumpled hoodie, unshaven, holding a pint of something lukewarm and full of regret. Our eyes met for a split second. She smiled. Not a hey I miss you smile. A hey I'm fine without you smile. And honestly, that broke something inside me I didn't even know was still intact. Mark must have seen my face because he clapped a hand on my shoulder, steering me toward the door. Let's go, he said. No point bleeding where people can watch. We stumbled out into the cold, the night air slapping my face like an intervention. Back at the motel, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the cracked mirror above the dresser. Why, who was this guy? How had trying to do the right thing, love someone, be loyal, be good, turned me into the villain of someone else's story? I didn't have the answer. Maybe I never would. But one thing was clear. The version of my life where Emily was still my future? That version was over. And it was time I started figuring out what came next. New Year's Eve rolled in like an uninvited guest. I stayed in that night, ignoring every come party text from the few friends who hadn't totally abandoned ship. I couldn't stomach the idea of counting down to midnight, surrounded by people pretending everything was shiny and perfect. Instead, I bought a frozen pizza, cracked open a can of discount beer, and watched old stand-up specials on Netflix, trying to remember what it felt like to laugh without bitterness stuck in my throat. Somewhere around 11:30, my phone buzzed. Emily, just her name lighting up the screen was enough to make my heart kick like a faulty engine. I stared at it for a solid minute. Then I picked it up. Hey, the message said. You around? I didn't know whether to laugh or launch my phone into the motel mini-fridge. But against every molecule of common sense, I replied. Yeah. 5 minutes later, she was outside my door. Yemen. She looked smaller somehow. Less put together. Hoodie. No makeup. Dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in a week. Can we talk? She asked. I stepped aside. Inside, she sat on the edge of the bed. The same spot where I'd spent the last week wondering what the hell had gone wrong. She stared at the floor. I'm sorry, she said. So quietly I almost missed it. I didn't say anything. Just let the silence stretch until it felt heavy enough to crush us both. I panicked, she went on. I thought, if you weren't doing anything wrong, it meant you were planning to. Or hiding something worse. I swallowed, throat dry. I said, voice rough. You built a case against me with no evidence. You made me into the bad guy because you were scared. She flinched. I know. Another long, brutal pause. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. I needed you to know it wasn't because you weren't enough. It was because you were too good. I shook my head, a sad little laugh escaping. That's not how it's supposed to work. She wiped her eyes. I know. Midnight struck somewhere far away, fireworks popping faintly like distant gunfire. So what now? She asked, voice trembling. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The girl I'd once wanted to spend forever with. The girl who'd broken me without even realizing it. Now, I said, now I figure out how to be okay without you. She nodded slowly, as if she'd known the answer before she even asked. She stood, hesitated for half a heartbeat, then walked out the door. I didn't stop her. The door clicked shut with a finality that echoed in my chest. Dahiyat. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. Dahiyat. New year, new start, right? Or at least, new scars to carry into it. One way or another. I wasn't the same guy who walked into that relationship all those years ago. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't entirely a bad thing. January dragged on like a bad sitcom season that should have ended 3 episodes ago. I found a small apartment, a studio the size of a generous walk-in closet, and signed the lease without even pretending to think it over. It smelled like fresh paint and quiet disappointment, but it was mine. No more shared spaces. No more eggshell walking. The first thing I bought was a mattress. Nothing fancy but new. A clean start, even if it was just memory foam. Then a secondhand couch from a thrift shop, where everything seemed slightly haunted. I didn't care. I just needed somewhere to sit that didn't remind me of motel beds and tear-stained pillows. Nah, it felt weird. Building a life from scratch when you weren't planning to. Most days were a mix of fake it till you make it, and don't text your ex. I threw myself into work. Took overtime. Picked up small freelance gigs. Filled every hour I could because empty time was dangerous. An open invitation for memories to sneak back in. Nights were the hardest. Nights were when my brain ran highlight reels I didn't ask for. Movie marathons on rainy Saturdays. Inside jokes whispered over late-night pancakes. The way Emily used to steal all the covers and pretend she didn't. I kept thinking, maybe if I'd just explained better. Maybe if I'd been more patient. Maybe if I'd fought harder. But deep down, I knew. You can't fight someone's fears for them. They have to choose to put down the sword. One Thursday night, after a particularly soul-numbing shift at work, I found myself at a coffee shop I'd never been to before. The kind of place with cracked leather chairs and a wall of battered books nobody actually read. I ordered a black coffee and settled into a corner, pretending to answer emails. That's when I noticed her. Not Emily. Someone new. She sat at the table across from me, nose buried in a thick paperback, hair pulled up in a messy bun, an untouched chai latte growing cold beside her. She looked peaceful. Not Instagram perfect, peaceful. Real peaceful, like she didn't care if anyone was watching. It hit me then, sharp and unexpected. I missed that. That kind of stillness, that kind of quiet. Not chaos dressed up as passion. Not adrenaline masquerading as love. Real. I didn't say anything. Didn't walk over. Didn't interrupt her world to announce my own lonely existence. Instead, I sipped my coffee. Sat in the silence, neither why. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like a beginning. A week later, I found myself back at that same coffee shop, the one with cracked leather chairs, chipped mugs, and a rotating playlist of indie folk songs that made every sip of coffee feel like a scene from a low-budget movie. The air inside was warm, thick with the scent of cinnamon and burnt espresso beans, and outside the windows, winter pressed against the glass, leaving frosty fingerprints in its wake. And there she was. Still there, different book this time, something thick, with a battered spine and a constellation of sticky notes poking from the pages. Same messy bun. Same oversized sweater that made her look like she'd wandered out of a painting about cozy loneliness. I hesitated, hovering near the counter after ordering my coffee. For a wild second I considered leaving. What if last week was a fluke? What if she didn't even remember me? But something in me stayed rooted to the spot. So I sat a few tables away. Laptop open. Fingers pretending to type. Every so often I'd glance up, catching her mid-laugh at whatever was in her book, or tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear absent-mindedly. She seemed completely unaware of anyone watching, so absorbed in her own little universe that it felt almost sacred. It was disarming, the way she just was, unapologetically. No performative smiles, no side glances to check who might be looking. She was simply herself. Raw my third fake email, our eyes met. She smiled. BCO. Not a come talk to me smile, not a just being polite smile, a real smile. Fake a we some orchestin. The kind that says, hey, I see you there. And this time I smiled back without hesitation. Markeston? Simple, normal, revolutionary. About 20 minutes later, she packed up her things. Book, journal, chai latte half drunk. And as she passed my table, she paused. You always work this late? She asked, her voice lilting, teasing. Caught mid-pretend typing, I closed my laptop halfway and chuckled. Professional procrastinator. Elite level. She laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that cracked something open inside me. Something I'd thought might have sealed shut forever. Same, she said, shifting her tote bag higher on her shoulder. I'm Mia, by the way. Tyler, I replied, offering my hand. She shook it firmly. No hesitation, no calculation. Nice to meet you, Tyler, she said. Maybe next time you can teach me your professional secrets. And just like that, she was gone, disappearing into the cold night air, leaving a faint scent of peppermint and paper in her wake. I sat there long after she left, my coffee cooling into bitterness, my laptop forgotten, not because I thought that moment meant we were destined for anything. Not because I believed it would undo the damage of the last few months. But because, for the first time in a long time, something small and quiet inside me stirred. Hope. Not the explosive, sweeping kind. Not the desperate clawing toward a perfect life, with a perfect person. Just a little flicker, an ember, and it was enough. The next day, I went back. Not because I expected to see her again, but because the coffee shop had become something more than a place to hide. It was a symbol now, a marker on the map of starting over. Kenyexi. I sat by the window, laptop open again, this time genuinely working. No fake emails. No desperate glances. Kenyexi. And then, because the universe has a sense of humor, Mia walked in, same messy bun. Different sweater. She spotted me instantly, her smile lighting up her whole face. Look who's back, she teased, setting her drink down a few tables away. Guilty, I said. Apparently this place has a gravitational pull. It's the burnt coffee, she joked. Very underrated. We ended up talking for an hour that day. About books. About music. About how we both secretly loved terrible horror movies, even though we were too proud to admit it to most people. Ral. It wasn't a date. It wasn't a confession of feelings. Ral. It was two people sharing a space, cracking open tiny pieces of themselves without fear of judgment. And it was enough. When she left that day, she said, "Same time next week?" And without thinking, without weighing every possible outcome, without checking if it was safe or wise, I said, "Yeah, I'd like that." Because maybe healing isn't about giant leaps or perfect timing. Maybe it's about small, stubborn steps forward. Even if your knees still shake. Even if your heart still remembers how it broke. One simple hello. One honest conversation. One ordinary miracle at a time. Weeks turned into a soft routine. Every Wednesday evening, like clockwork, Mia and I would find ourselves at our coffee shop. No formal plans, no overthinking. Just an unspoken agreement that this time, things didn't need to be complicated. No abrase. We talked about everything and nothing. Favorite childhood cartoons. Weird irrational fears. She confessed a mortal terror of clowns. I admitted an ongoing vendetta against ventriloquist dummies. We debated whether Die Hard was a Christmas movie. It is, obviously, and swapped guilty pleasure songs we'd only listened to when no one else was around. I learned she worked as a freelance illustrator, mostly children's books, though she'd recently picked up a gig designing indie album covers. "Pays the bills," she said once, twirling her straw around a lukewarm iced coffee. Mostly. She asked about me too. About my job, sure, but also about the things that mattered. What made me laugh? What kept me up at night? What my best memory was? Nobody had asked me that in a long time. Not to cross-examine. Not to build a case against me. First, just to know. First, I answered carefully. Like every word had to pass a security check before it was allowed out. But Mia had this way of sitting in silence that wasn't awkward. It was safe. The kind of silence that says, take your time. And eventually, I did. One night, after a rainstorm had turned the streets into glistening rivers of neon reflections, we sat in the coffee shop long after closing time. The barista wiped tables around us, but nobody asked us to leave. You ever think about how much people hide? Mia asked suddenly, gazing out the window. All the time, I said. Maybe that's why it feels so rare when someone just shows up. She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't have to. And something inside me, some old, battered piece of my heart, quietly exhaled. Showing up. That's all I'd ever wanted. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough to start over. That night, when we parted ways, she lingered by the door. Tyler, she said, almost shyly. I'm glad you kept coming back. Me too, I said, meaning it more than I'd meant anything in months. We smiled. No promises, no grand declarations. Just two people, battered but unbroken, figuring it out one crooked step at a time. I watched her disappear into the night, the cold air swirling around her like a whispered secret, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a failure. I didn't feel like a villain in someone else's story. Chet. I felt like a guy who'd survived something brutal and still found a way to hold out his hand again. Chet. Still found a way to stay open. Maybe healing wasn't some epic cinematic event with swelling music and tearful speeches. Pastain. Maybe it was small. Pastain. Maybe it was choosing to stay when it was easier to run. Maybe it was believing, against all odds, that some things, some people, were still worth trusting. Even when your heart knows exactly how it feels to break. Especially then. I shoved my hands into my jacket pockets and turned down the street, heading toward a future that, for once, didn't scare me. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't certain. But it was real. And for the first time in a long, long time, that was more than enough.